Hello, everyone. Welcome to May's Unread Book Club. Um, we are reading Facing Codependency, and I'll have in a minute, I'll have Antoine kind of give maybe an introduction about the book and his pick, um, and why he picked the book. Um, but in the meantime, I think it'll be good for us to settle in, maybe take some couple of minutes of breathing, just so that we can all be here together. Um, whether you're watching it or you're here with us or you're watching the replay. If you are in a position to close your eyes, feel free to do so. And just exhale and inhale and pay attention to your breath naturally. No need to change anything in the breathing. We just want to be aware of our breath. And with each inhale, allow yourself to go deeper and deeper within yourself, relaxing into the core of your being. Letting go of any of the stresses of the day and any anxiety of the future, and just relax into your being. Knowing that at the core of our being, we are all in that space together. Even though we are miles apart, somehow at that space, we can all be at that space, and it's the same space. And as we come back into our physical space, whatever room that we're in, we bring that awareness of the core of our being, we bring that presence with us into this online gathering as we discuss and have a dialogue and discussion. And whenever you're ready, if you have your eyes closed, feel free to open them and bring that awareness and that quality of attention to the room and your surroundings and to each other as we're sharing this space. Alhamdulillah, thank God. And thank you all for being here, joining us in this May Unread Book Club. I'm gonna have Antoine unmute himself and tell us more about the book.
Hey, good evening. That was beautiful, man. Thank you. for leading us in that silence and meditation. Um,
Antoine,
uh-huh.
I'm sure you've heard this before, but you have a really beautiful smile.
Oh God, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, thank you all for just being here with us tonight and diving into this book, this pick of mine called Facing Codependency. Um, this year, a lot of our picks center around love and perception and the things that like sort of block us from a really quality self-love and sort of appropriate love of reality and love of one another and things like that. So we've already gone through books like The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller, The Journey to the Lord's Power by Ibn Arabi, um, All About Love by Bell Hooks, The Entanglement, How Art and Philosophy Make Us What We Are by Alva Noe. And now here we are with this month by a book by Pia. How do you pronounce her name? Pia Mellody, Amaldi. And she was an American author, lecturer, and pioneer in the field of addiction, relationship recovery, and childhood trauma. She's widely considered one of the preeminent clinical authorities on codependency. Um, she openly shared that her clinical models were born from her own personal healing journey, having struggled with low self-esteem, hypervigilance, and generational family addiction. She passed away on May 7th of last year at the age of 82, leaving behind this legacy, another way to view and approach self-love. Um, so this book, Facing Codependency, I chose it just because when I was doing the research about what books can have us look closer at what self-love is, how we relate to ourselves and one another, this is one of the works that came up, along with Bell Hooks and other people who feel like that in order to really know what it is to love ourselves, there's a level of self-inquiry and reflection and excavation that has to be done, um, based on the things that, part of our traumas and conditionings and the things that structured our reality. So she takes us through a lot of different things in her books. And basically, I picked out a couple of things that stuck out to me that we can talk about, but anything that you all have found, feel free to jump in and speak about and, discuss. And the first thing is on page, oh, first, who's familiar with her work already? Paul, you, huh? Actually, you shared something earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with this work before we jump into my passage? You're on mute, by the way.
Well, as I said, about 40 years ago, when codependency was kind of new on the scene, um, I was active for about a year or more in the Codependence Anonymous group.
Mhm.
You know, so um, it was I wasn't surprised by what was said. I was just seeing if a self-help group of people who were all in various phases of disrepair, how well they hold up for one another.
Mhm.
And my experience, pretty disappointing. Um, as you know, I mean, I've been better off if I'd been an alcoholic than in Codependence Anonymous. But that's idiolect. That's my uh, way of relating to my experience of this particular group at a particular time.
Mm.
Um,
Had you read her
you
work
know,
already?
that I read her work while I was in the group. I was part of, reading and getting a sense of knowing what codependence is supposed to be,
Mm,
and recognizing the various experiences. I think um, that in a general way, most of our codependent tendencies arise from initially the childhood trauma.
hmm
That would be focus on it, just that. And there's, in that way, all of us uh, easily be bent in a variety of ways, in codependent ways. But then, of course, the secondary thing is as adults, or um, why are we attracted to people who put us through the pretzel twists of codependency, either in expectation or in distorting your own. You love somebody with his, nobody loves anybody. Uh, um, what was that word that you like to use sometimes? Um, you can't love somebody as if you're God.
hmm
We all carry with us shadows in our lights, but we can try to love each other with a clear conscience. If, uh, and things, and then you find that you're being accused of various motives that you didn't know you had,
hmm
because they aren't there.
hmm
They're in the, they're in the perception of the projection of the person that you're involved with.
Yeah.
Codependency is like being in a hall of mirrors in which the lights are off, so you're going to bump into them one way or the other, whether you can see or not. Okay,
Thank you for
that's that's,
sharing.
that's my brief encounter of what codependence was for me. Not that I've ceased being codependent. Uh,
I
I,
think it's a
I'm I'm
lifetime journey, right?
I'm codependent on air now, so I'll take that and let somebody else talk.
That was one of her things. She said that like once you realize that once a person realizes they have codependent tendencies, that you're always in a state of like either recovery or slipping back into the habits and then getting back to recovery. And I can see that in my own life. So one of the first passages I wanted to read was this passage that sort of gives a picture of what it might look like in society if one is having codependent tendencies. Um, is it? Oh yeah, it's up right here. Okay. Or do you have it right here?
Is it the end? This codependent survival traits condoned by society?
Yep.
Okay.
hmm And I'll go ahead and read that. So it's important to note that the survival traits that develop in children are at either of two extremes, and the adult symptoms of codependency are also at two extremes. Our society believes that people who exhibit the characteristics at one extreme, arrogance, invulnerability, perfectionism, anti dependence, and being in control, are healthy, well adjusted adults. However, the pain in their lives from unfulfilling relationships, unsatisfying careers, depression, and other problems would indicate that they are not functional adults. I believe that people exhibiting survival traits at either extreme are suffering from codependence. Mhm. And on that next page, where the diagram is, if I can read this other part, because it's um, horizontal, let me see if I can get it, is at the bottom of the page. Our culture believes that the better than invulnerable, perfectionist, anti dependent, and controlling person is healthy. Oh, is it the exact same quote? But in fact, these are codependent characteristics and are much more difficult to treat than the characteristics at the other extreme, less than, too vulnerable, rebellious, too dependent, and chaotic. The absence of horizontal lines in this column. Okay, so those are some passages that stuck out to me so far. And
What about those in particular that um that stuck out to you? Because I know I can see from this is that she's seeing that the two sides of the extreme side of the spectrum,
Hmm.
right? Of whether it's codependence of how she's talking about it, or I guess when she says anti-dependent, meaning like hyper-dependent,
Yeah.
or right, like extremely independent. That both of these things are stemming from the same root of what she calls it, like shame core or something like that.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Carried shame or carried guilt,
hmm
carried feelings, she described it as.
hmm
Um, all in the effort for this child who's growing up in an environment that's not exactly feasible for a healthy situation is learning how to survive. And yeah, on one end, certain things have them either go in either direction of the spectrum that she's talking about.
hmm
It's just that one of those spectrums in society looks like, I mean, what our society would probably call alpha male or alpha female at some point, when really maybe that, according to what she's saying, is a symptom of codependency. That's why I think that's why it stuck out the most for me because I only viewed before reading this book codependency as, the extremely vulnerable, the person who just really needs someone in order to say, hey, it's okay that you do this or you do that, or they just really needy. I never looked at codependency um, on that other end of the spectrum. Yeah, so that stuck out to me because I mean, when you look across at society and the energy that seems to be mostly running this paradigm that we're in right now, it looks like maybe a bunch of trauma curving in on itself, creating the reality we're all trying to navigate through.
Well, that's the thing that in that chapter, in chapter 7, that I think she's talking about is how these quote unquote symptoms uh, show up from generation to generation, right? From a parent who might be having codependence tendencies, right? In whether it's within shame, trauma, abuse, and how she defines abuse more of like a broader term, right? Kind of like anything that's not unnurturing. I think that's the word that she used, right?
Yeah.
Anything that's unnurturing is, according to her, is somewhat of an abuse, and that it's transferring generation to from generation to generation. Now the thing is, it becomes tricky because, or not tricky. Sometimes you hear these phrases of like, I don't want to be like my father, or I don't want to be like my mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember catching myself in that, and like, and seeing people around me, um, very close. Sometimes it's easier to see it in other people saying, I don't want to be like my father or like my mother because of, let's say, the trauma or the abuse or the unnurturing aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And then, true on the surface level, you might not be, meaning all the symptoms of codependency that you read here, you'd be like, oh, I'm not dependent in the way that my dad or mom is, right? Or maybe they're arrogant and you trying to be not arrogant, right? But like you really just being the same thing, just the flip side of it. So
Yeah.
you're reaching at pretty much the same destination. The only difference is that from the outside, it might look a little different. Um, or you know what? They were never in control. I want to be in control. I don't want to be like my parents. I want to be more in control. And by doing that, you're still, according to her, going in that codependence circle or box or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to read what RM said here. See.
Excuse me. Could I just ask a question?
Absolutely.
Uh, it would be really helpful for me if we could have a basic definition of codependency.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Did she give that?
It's a big concept.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I don't know where did I read it in the book, but I figure this is the best way to. Okay. So she defined it as codependency as failure to be in a healthy relationship with oneself. Rather than treating it simply as a relationship problem with another person, her model views it as a state of developmental immaturity caused by childhood trauma or less than nurturing parenting. Sort of like an internal fracture.
So just help me out here. That means that you are codependent on what or whom? Because I think to me, in the traditional sense, codependency is human beings in their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So if she's talking about your relationship with yourself and being, I'm confused. But I don't want to sidetrack you here and take up
No,
time.
please jump in. This is good basis of conversation. Um, from what I was seeing in her writing, she's saying that you basically can't have one without the other. You can't have um, a coherent relationship with another person without having the relationship with yourself, and you can't have this relationship with yourself in any kind of coherent way without a relationship, a healthy relationship with another being. So you're looking from what I took from the book, you're looking at these traits that you might have that's coming up, preventing you from relating to another person or to yourself in a healthy way. So you're either overly dependent on the person or you're oscillating, depending on where you are on the spectrum she created, between overly dependent or trying to control the reality so that your needs could be met in a subconscious way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did that give anything, or was that a bunch of
Yeah,
gibberish?
that's like totally uh, uh, changed my mindset on what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Did you also view it at first as just sort of the need, similar how I did in the beginning, as the neediness of the person?
Um, yeah, I think so. But then when you talked about the two extremes being actually the same thing, it really made a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it shocked me too when I was reading the book.
yeah,
I didn't see it
I mean,
like.
when you meet people that seem to be so self-assured and so arrogant, um, and independent, um, actually, it's masking.
Mhm.
Is what she's positing.
Yeah, exactly. She spoke about this thing called lack or need or want, that in some of these individuals, and I can relate sometime to this a lot of times, where it's hard for you to even understand what your needs or wants are, almost as if because you weren't, it wasn't modeled for you in any kind of consistent way, you can't even access what a need is that a normal or I should say a more functioning healthy adult can do consistently. So you'll have to be reminded or build up the habits that would naturally you know be apparent in a person who's gone through the, I guess, the a healthy rearing.
So, is there such a thing as a healthy codependency?
It's a great question. I have no idea.
Okay, well, I'm gonna I'm gonna sign.
Oh, you went on mute, we can't hear you.
I just was saying I'm gonna sign out here and stop asking questions and let you
No,
proceed with what you wanted to present here tonight.
no, it's an absolute discussion, like based on
Yeah.
what we're reading. So jump, anyone, everyone, jump in wherever you are. If you see something or want to have thoughts, is for us to play. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things, I don't know if she actually used the term interdependent, right? Did she ever use that term in the book,
No,
Antoine?
no.
Right, but she's, I think yeah, I think that's one of the things in the model that she presented is that somewhat, I don't know where I put it right here in the notes, that somewhat, um, her ideal, yeah, kind of like what you said, Antoine, in the beginning, is just it's always a working in progress. Um, kind of staying on guard as far as falling back into codependence tendencies, right? And it makes sense given that what Paul said in the beginning, which I don't know where he went. Um,
Mm.
Hopefully he comes back, but about having this 12-step program around this thing, um, you, I don't know if she's under the school of like you always have to be on guard whether where you are in this codependence thing. So it's a little fracture as far as she's not giving a some kind of aim that's a holistic kind of aim. But I think since her work, which this was when was this like 40 years ago?
1989. Yeah,
Yeah,
89.
since then there's been a lot of research about interdependency and
Hmm.
kind of this relationship with oneself and other. Maybe her work was foundational in creating that.
Hmm.
But I don't think in this particular book she mentioned that.
She does have a name for it though. Like, even though she doesn't mention interdependentness, like she calls it basically finding your preciousness again. And it's the idea that like your relationship with yourself and others are based on this idea that you are inherently of value. You don't have to do anything to be of value. So it's sort of like interdependentness with that sort of emotional tenderness connected to it. That could just be me. When I usually hear interdependentness spoken about, it is relational based on like teamwork or getting something done or like, the mechanics of the team. But when she describes it as finding your preciousness, it's like she's adding this relational softness back to the conversation in terms of you're of value without having to produce value, and having that not just be an intellectual concept, but a felt embodied way of being.
I mean,
You know,
that's what nurturing parenting does, right?
would you say, bro?
I mean, that's what like a nurturing parent would do for their child is to just, without explicitly stating, have a relationship in a way that just helps the child feel that they have inherent value, that it's
Mm-hmm.
not something they have to work or earn.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I can't claim to be that kind of parent, but that certainly, in reflecting on my own childhood and then the mistakes I made as a parent, uh, looking at the ways where um, my codependency with, say, my mother, you know, which soured me in some way, then sort of led me to sort of have a perspective that led to actions that played out with my relationship with my child. And then not really seeing that very clearly, though, because I was more blinded by the sort of pain and then the sort of the antithesis of doing the antithesis of what caused that pain in itself can cause pain, because it's a reactionary way of living. You like you were saying, Osama, she's kind of, it seems like she's implying you sort of need to be guarded. Well, I would say a person who's, codependent is always guarded, but it's a misguided guardedness. It's a guardedness where they think they're redirecting themselves in another direction, but they're still just, maybe they're not doing the same thing, but they're letting that thing guide them. They're letting that pain guide them. which is still painful, and then that's going to come out in some painful way, even with the best intentions. I remember when my daughter was very young, um, I used to sort of like, oh, don't do that because you could get hurt, or don't do that, you're gonna get. And one day she goes to me, she's very young at this time. She goes, Dad, you're starting to put a lot of fear into me. And I was like, oh, wow. And I really thought about that. I was very thankful that she said that.
Wow. How old was she?
4 or 5 years.
Wow. That's wow.
We were at the mall and she was like leaning on like the sort of glass railing, and I was like, oh, don't lean on that. That could break. She's like, Dad, you're making me scared. Like you're putting a lot of fear into me. You make me afraid of everything. I was like, oh. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because when I was young, I was sort of like foolhardy and just ran headfirst in everything. And I broke a lot of bones and injured myself a lot. And maybe that's where that comes from. I'm not really sure. But, I now I have this little body in front of me and I'm like, oh, I got to protect that at all costs, and so I guess it just becomes this sort of like, because I've had these experiences where it's easy, the human body breaks really easily. So I've experienced that a number of times. So now I have this sort of like apprehensiveness, which was coming out, without thought. But it was a guardedness, like I'm being guarded in the sense that like I'm now like overprotecting my child and creating fear in her. And then she's scared to go out, and, how that could unfold throughout her life, in big ways, I'm sure, just to take chances, do stuff.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, bro. And I forgot I wanted to definitely read some of what RM has been saying in the comments. First, she said, let's see. Oh, that she loved the comparison chart. I'm a parent myself, and I have found that parenting is a balancing act. Balance of boundaries, but staying nurturing, giving options, but within limits. I feel that. I was recently listening to a podcast by a psychiatrist who mentioned that by trying to do opposite of what one's parents did, which created trauma, is not optimum as well, which you were saying, David. Um, and she goes on to say, kind of like staying committed in parenting with presence to towards towards child during their good or their bad. I guess with presence towards the child during their good or their bad. A child is not defined by a behavior, but able to see the essence of being in them, their intrinsic goodness. Oh, and then she said, what a smart girl," talking about your daughter. So I put into Google this idea of, this relationship between what we know in modern day as interdependence, as O brought up, and then what Pia is talking about in terms of finding your preciousness. And this is what it came up based on her framework. It says, in Pia's framework, finding your preciousness is the absolute prerequisite for achieving healthy interdependence. Without establishing your own inherent value, true interdependence is impossible. You will instead fall into codependent patterns of either desperate over-reliance or walled off isolation. One, inherent preciousness heals self-esteem. Pia teaches that preciousness is your birthright. It means you have immense value simply because you exist, and that value is exactly equal to everyone else's. The codependent flaw, without finding this internal preciousness, you determine your worth externally. You either feel completely worthless, less than, or grandiose, better than. The shift, recognizing your preciousness stabilizes your self-esteem, moving you from external performance to internal security. Two, preciousness creates functional boundaries. Once you realize you are precious, you naturally want to protect that value, which allows you to establish healthy boundaries. The codependent flaw, if you do not view yourself as precious, you lack boundaries. You allow others to abuse or define you, or you build massive walls to keep everyone out. The shift, boundaries protect your preciousness while allowing you to safely connect with others. You realize your thoughts and feelings matter, but so do the other person's. And lastly, three, the accumulation, interdependence. Interdependence is the ability for two functional, well bounded adults to share life, vulnerability, and support without losing their individual identities. The codependent flaw, true interdependence requires two whole people. If you do not feel precious, you enter relationships seeking savior, too dependent, or refusing all help, hyper independent. The shift, when you embrace your preciousness, you no longer look to a partner to give you a sense of worth. You can state your needs clearly, accept help graciously, and support your partner without absorbing their identity. In short, preciousness establishes the self, while interdependence is the safe, mature bridge built between yourself and another. What do you guys think about that in ladies?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of it seems like she maybe yeah maybe not having the language of what we now call interdependence, um, but this idea of two whole people, two whole individuals, having relationship or being in relation, this idea of relations subject to subject, right? Like a complete individual, complete whole individual, and is that individual is communicating or in relation from their entire subjectivity and viewing the other person as a complete whole person with their own subjective inner being, and that the communication is happening from that level. Um, which is kind of, yeah, that's the aim, right? But um, to get to that point of reaching one's own subject, like real inner being,
Mhm.
and being to have a relationship from that space, I guess what she's calling knowing your preciousness, or being in intimacy with oneself and creating those boundaries, and being able to communicate those boundaries about your, I guess maybe she's talking about real self-esteem, right? This idea that I think she presented, that if a parent doesn't have a real quote unquote established self-esteem, they will inherit that to the child as other esteem, right? Where now the child is looking for recognition from outside, right? Whether that recognition is coming from society of them being hyper independent, right? Because the society is saying, good job, you are alpha individual, or getting that really dependent, codependent on another individual, and having that esteem, their own self-esteem being based on the other individual, giving them that, right? So having that self-esteem, it seems like it's talking about that preciousness, establishing one's own self-knowing, self-intimacy, generative, self-generative esteem of how they view themselves.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm.
I have no idea how anyone, this is just coming from me, I have no idea how anyone could come into an awareness of their preciousness without a spiritual life. I mean,
Indeed.
I mean, who am I to say, but I mean, we're not talking about, to me, we're not talking about psychology or anatomy here. We're talking
Right.
about how does one understand their preciousness, as she puts it?
Mm,
Mhm.
From your mother, from your father, from your kids, from your bank account. I mean, from
Right.
That all what you all described right there, that would be she would describe all of that as external validation of identity, and she would say that's where we shouldn't necessarily be going to find our worthiness at, because if that crumbles, everything crumbles. But to your point, she describes that by the end of the book, she goes into this idea of spirituality, and she said when a baby is first born, basically your parents are God, and you're learning about God and the relationship between you and God, on a pre-verbal level from that relationship. And ultimately,
parents. No parents are God. So
facts,
the road.
facts, which is probably why nearly the God of every religion somehow has some human attributes that are like, are they God's attributes, or are they just us projecting our parental figures onto this ineffable divinity that we can't describe but know is there? What do you guys think about that? About
Yeah. No,
what
I
Brooke says?
think that that question about finding one's own preciousness is really on point. I feel like that's the crux of the whole thing, right? Um, does it require a spiritual life in the sense that culturally we might understand spiritual life? I don't know. Does it require a diving deeper within oneself? I believe so, right? So the road, the idea of know thyself, I feel like that's the road to, this is my personal opinion, that's the road to finding that preciousness and being able to feel that preciousness rather than conceptualize that preciousness, right? Because it's easy to and I think maybe she talks about in the book about autonomy, right? It's easy to read or to hear, even from one's parent, that you are special, you're smart, you're good, you're beautiful, all that kind of stuff, which is amazing, obviously. It kind of it builds that self-esteem, or it builds that preciousness in some kind of level, especially getting it from, from one's parent. But if it's when it's really felt rather than just staying on the level of psychology or conceptualizing, and it's felt and when it really becomes yours, when you know that this preciousness or this knowing is actually yours and it's not read or it's not somebody else's voice that happens to be inside of your head or one's own projection fantasizing and just creating whatever it is. Um, so that might be maybe what she's meaning about it's a whole journey. It's the long journey of finding that preciousness. And I feel maybe to your point, Lori, like that spiritual life might be one of these places where we might taste it first, right? And have some kind of a reference point to that preciousness that is innate within us. The thing is becomes now it's like part of the daily work in order to continually reorient to that preciousness.
Yeah,
But I say all that to say that I'm with you in regards to the importance of a maybe spiritual life, maybe contemplative life, maybe a meditative life, maybe knowing oneself life, whatever that is, whatever that inward journey is.
yeah.
Um, I'm definitely with that.
Same. And one
Uh,
thing I would like to add, oh, I'll just say this and then I'll let you jump in, Paul. One thing I like to add about that, just for, I don't know, symmetry's sake, that as important as it is also important not to slip into or drift into spiritual bypassing. Like Jesus is going to do it all, or leaving it all to Allah. Like actual, coming from that, whatever that realness is for oneself, but without burying whatever the issues are, like letting God or that relationship with God be a way of healing the whole self rather than sort of head in the sand in spirituality kind of thing.
Yeah, it takes some agency on the
Yeah.
part of individuals. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Well,
Point.
I wrote an essay on this mainly because I wanted not to drift, and so to be to start with the of Tawhid is agency and not spiritual bypass. I'll just read it. Akbari Tawhid teaches that all effective agency belongs to the real. This truth can be misused as a spiritual bypass by excusing compulsive rescuing or avoiding the difficult work of boundary setting. If God does everything, then my overfunctioning doesn't matter. If God is in charge, I don't need to say no. These are expressions Tawhid, they are evasions addressed in metaphysics. For Ibn Arabi, the oneness of agency does not cancel human responsibility. It refines it. Outcomes belong to the real, not to the human being, but the human being remains responsible for placement and adab, for intention, for proportion, for the clarity of one's yes and one's no. The codependent heart errs in not in loving, but in quietly assuming a scope of agency that belongs only to the real. It tries to become the necessary cause of another person's survival, sobriety, mood, or redemption. This is a form of shirk al-khalif, the hidden associating, not the worship of another god, but the subtle treating of a wound, the finite self, as it were, an absolute on whom others depend for existence. And this is almost never done out of arrogance. It's done out of terror. A terror that is, if one stops, the other will fall apart. The terror that if one says no, one will be abandoned. The terror that if one is not needed, one will vanish. The tragedy is not that the heart cares. The tragedy is that no one ever taught it how to care as a finite thing. Here's the preciousness, the finite thing. How to love without dissolving, how to stand without hardening, how to be a barzak again. Two languages in one wound. Mellody's psychology and Akbarian metaphysics describe the same wound in different dialects. Now, Mellody distorted self-esteem is, in Akbarian terms, the heart forgetting its inherent karama, its dignity as a locus of divine regard. That is preciousness, not the scavenging of a borrowed value. What she calls boundary failure is the barzak collapsing, either into fusion, where the heart mistakes another's pain as its own essence, or into stone, where it pretends it's untouchable. What she calls the loss of inner reality is the mirror so preoccupied with reflecting others that it no longer recognizes the names inscribed within it. And again, names is capitalized, so those are the images of divine functioning. What she calls confusion around needs is the heart's inability to omit its fakir, its essential poverty without shame. And what she calls the loss of moderation is the heart's losing the rhythm of wasat, the middle way, the swinging between drowning in others and exiling them. You see, in a lot of ways, we never really dissolve our codependence, but we can recognize it as a dance of shadows, and we don't have to get caught up in them too much. We just get swayed by them. Seen through this dual lens, codependence is not an excessive love. It is love focused into the shape of a little God, a heart trying to be the source rather than the threshold. And that's the adab of the heart bazak. This abdab follows from its nature. The barzak does not merge because merging erases the distinction that allows it to mediate. It does not withdraw because withdrawal severs the connection it is meant to hold. It receives without absorbing. It reflects without claiming authorship. In psychological terms, this means the heart can emphasize without assuming total responsibility for another's inner world. It can say yes and no without collapsing into guilt or rage. It recognizes its own needs and the needs of others as equally real. In lived practice, the adab sounds like quiet proportion. Your suffering moves me, but it is not my essence. I can offer help or limit or truth, but I cannot live your life for you. My well-being is not forbidden simply because you are struggling. My boundaries are not a betrayal of love, but part of my trust. The shift is not from I rescue you or I don't care. It is from without me, you are lost to without the real, both of us are lost. And yet both of us are held. And that is the heart returning to its rightful scale. The cure is not a fortress. The cure for codependence is not a hyper independence. It is not the clenched declaration, I don't need anyone. It is not the wall of anger, fear, silence, or polite coldness, nor is it a spirituality that uses God is in charge to avoid difficult conversations or necessary departures. Mellody is unequivocal. Uh, Recovery leads to interdependence, not isolation. The Akbari and Tawhid affirms this. Only the real is absolutely independent. Human beings are structurally needy and mutually entangled. The task is not to erase the deed, but to make it transparent and rightly ordered. And thus the path toward forward includes permission. Permission to lean on God, on friends, on community, permission to ask to rest, be small, permission to say this relationship is harming me and to leave. It's also the right permission to be very wrong. The heart is not required to be an idol for anyone, including itself. The cure is not a fortress, it is a doorway that knows it is a doorway. The moon does not strain to shine, it simply turns its face to the sun. And when the heart stops trying to be the source and begins to accept its place as the threshold, something subtle but decisive changes. Recovery becomes less about managing behaviors and more about learning to see again, seeing what belongs to oneself and what does not, seeing where one ends and another begins, seeing the difference between a present moment and an old wound wearing a new face. Mellody and Ibn Arabi converge here. Clarity is an ethical act, a form of adab. A
Oh,
heart that, yes, I'm finishing it. This is the end.
okay.
A heart that remembers the plenitude can finally discern proportion. It can tell the difference between real danger and inherited fear, between a call for presence and a projection of the past, between a person who is drowning and a person who is simply wet. This is an accurate seeing. It is not dramatic. It is not revolutionary, It is the quiet realignment that allows love to flow without distortion. And once the heart begins to see this way, the world around it begins to shift as well. And sometimes in the smallest of villages, sometimes on the bank of an ordinary river. And thank you for putting up with that.
Putting up with it. I mean, God, that was a divine treasure, bro. Like, wow. Wow. Well, we already have comments asking people want that in writing. They want to see it, they want to have
I
access to it.
sent it to you. I already sent it to you. I sent it to you about a week ago. Not a
You
week. The last few days. I forget when I finished it.
is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for blessing us with that, man.
So you can pass it on to everyone.
Yeah, well, if it's okay with you, we'll probably publish it on the website or something.
Yeah, go ahead. It's,
Wow.
I mean, as I said, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to waver.
Yeah.
So what I did is I worked on being very clear on what I like about codependence and also where I find it limiting. And that's why I would prefer a more orientation towards what I call Akbarian mode. It's not that different in a lot of ways. One that gives you a chance to be more balanced and emphasizing the balance more than because the flip flop doesn't stop. Let's put it that way. I'm codependent enough to know that the flip flop don't stop, but that doesn't mean you're always busy. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much, man. David, you want to jump in there like after such a profound reading?
It's very hard to follow that. And maybe I'm going to sound a little disjointed because it kind of popped up for me in the beginning. Um, and I'm kind of circling back a little bit to sort of talk about the author's writing, um, which I, feel Paul was addressing. Um, she presents like a very sort of idealized model. And, you know, just to qualify, I didn't read the book, so maybe it was said somewhere later in the book. So, forgive me for that. But, um, this whole person that she describes to me is an enlightened being. I don't know anyone that functions on that level. And so I think about the fact that, we're more like an oscillating, phenomena where it's in certain circumstance, our better part shines forward, and then in other circumstance, it doesn't. And it's sometimes we can sort of predict when that's going to happen, sometimes we can't. But, as you live, you start to see patterns um, as things arise, or you might see it after the fact. That's usually the case for me, at least. Like, oh, I did that again, you know. Um, but I certainly spent a lot of time after becoming more aware of these patterns and how they play out and the triggers, etc., sort of gaslighting myself using spirituality like a sword, trying to stab away at it. Um, even if the language of that tradition is very nurturing and wholesome, it doesn't matter. You can still use it to injure yourself. And, you know, I don't want to get into a definition of the self, but these parts are ourselves. And we can look at them in negative ways or in more positive ways. And I mean, say what you will about IFS or internal family systems. I'm not saying it's some kind of amazing thing, but it was very revealing to me in the sense of like, you have to try to understand why our parts function the way they do, in that they are trying to protect our preciousness. maybe it's misguided, but it's almost like, like an animal that's been tortured or injured and it's scared. And so it acts in a certain way out of fear of that happening again. And so even though it's a disservice to us, it's still trying to act on our behalf. And I used to do this practice that was developed by this a Western Tibetan Lama practitioner. Her name is Lama Sochamellione. And she's a Chud practitioner. Chud is this Tibetan practice where you visualize chopping your body up into pieces and putting it into a skull and turning it into a feast that you then feed to demons as a way of pacifying them. And so she kind of redeveloped this into a more Western style practice, and she called it feeding your demons. And what you do is you sort of like come in contact with some aspect of pain within yourself as a physical sensation or a mental sensation, and you manifest it as a demon in front of yourself. And then you have a conversation with that demon. And you're basically like, what is it you want? You know, and then what do you need? What do you need? And you go through this process of basically giving that demon what it needs until it can transform into a being of light. Because in its essence, that's what it is. And it's trying to protect you, but it's just because of those circumstances, it became more like haggard and jaded. Very interesting practice. And I mean, I found it to be beneficial in a lot of ways. I personally thought like her specific method of doing it, there were parts I didn't like, so I didn't totally adopt it as like a long-term practice. But I used parts of it. And it's definitely very influenced by like internal family systems practices and stuff like that. But the idea is like it's so easy to sort of like knock ourselves down for our broken and bad parts, you know, and those parts have they themselves have an inherent goodness to them because they're part of us and we have inherent goodness, right? That's all I wanted to share.
Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that. Um, it's such a interesting connection between what you shared, David, and what uh Paul read, especially um this line that the moon doesn't strain to shine, it simply turns its face towards the sun, right? Um, kind of getting to a place within myself, within the individual self, to know the the place of which we occupy, or the place of which I occupy within myself, as I understand myself to be, and all of these different parts, kind of what you named, that somehow we may experience them as demons, or maybe, you know, have these wounds, really, they're wounds, as you're saying, and they're really there to protect us in some type of way, whether it's shame, guilt, or codependence, or whatever, all of these things. And the thing is also not to be overly identified with these wounds, or sitting or being in a place of a dog chasing its tail, needing to know why this wound exists to begin with. Why? What is it then from my father or my mother? Why did it, right? And have an idea, this level of acceptance of what the reality is right now, how it shows up right now, as a wound, kind of like what you said. as a, or if I'm a moon, as a moon, and the sun, the light is coming from the sun, which is whatever that metaphor that we would want to use that light to be, divine, or higher self, or the whole self, or the self that has the quote unquote demon integrated, or now the demons are realized as light being, right? Whatever visualization we would want to give it, um, but being in a space where, okay, right now this is what it is. This is how the wound shows up right now. Um, I can go in and try to find the root cause, the why how did this wound show up the way it did. I may be successful and I may not. Memory is a fuzzy thing, like, so, um, really meeting reality and meeting oneself in the moment of
Yeah,
these
I'm
things.
sorry, but we have a codependent dog here.
Look at that. I love it. I mean, that's one of the great teachers, right? Animals, they tell you when they want love. They tell you, when they're hungry. They show you
Isn't
exactly
she
what
sweet? Look at that.
feeding.
Oh my goodness.
I love it. What's her name?
Her name is Noisette. It's a
No,
French word for chestnut. Hazel,
Noisette.
I'm sorry, Noisette.
Noisette. Look at that. That's cute. I love it.
She just
Yeah,
came to me.
I love
But
it.
as you were talking, Osama, it made me think of how the moon is precious,
Mm-hmm.
but it can be interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Indeed.
Mhm.
And also, as everyone was speaking tonight, I just kept having this image of how uh, interdependency, codependency, uh, victimization, trauma, it's all a spectrum, isn't it?
Mhm.
So if we're thinking of one thing on this side and something else on this other, and to me, a spectrum is two-dimensional, but this almost looks to me like what we're talking about is a three-dimensional spectrum, whatever you call that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really analyze, evaluate, and make progress when you're dealing with something that's so
Multidimensional.
multidimensional and extremely personal for each individual human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You can only talk about it in um, sort of a delicate
Mhm.
way. Not that it's not valuable, but it's not one size fits all, is it? I mean, it's just so particular to the individual person.
Mm.
And also as we progress in life, the way that an 18-year-old views themselves and what we're talking about versus someone who's 80
Mhm.
or 45, it's just wow. If there's something more than three-dimensional, whatever that would be, um, no.
Yeah. Um,
The Yeah, yeah, I think that there's one of the problems in codependency, generally speaking, is that we tend to uh, create images in our heart of perfection, human perfection, emotional perfection.
Exactly, exactly. I thought that was, yeah, that was
Yeah,
really through my mind too. Thank you, Paul.
okay, but I think there's another way to subvert that in a way that doesn't that lets the real remain utterly transcendent of all of our projections, and at the same time we can still be intimately uh, uh, healed, and because love is the real, loving the real. And the real that's loving the real is loving the real that is at our root us. There is no one that is not intimately in a dance and in a discovery to the real that can never be touched. And yet it touches us. It touches us. We don't have to catch Moby Dick. We can fry a little fish and say that's we it is enough. And believe it, it's in our own finitude, our own utter lack of being the person that we think we want to be, and just being ourselves and being reasonably good. So when we're tired and we get angry, we get tired, we get angry, we get grumpy, we get grumpy. Well, okay, that's just us being a personality. That's not, there's still, we can find uh, companionship and intimacy with the real. And when we love another person, and we love all people to some degree, all we're doing is saying, acknowledging their realness, but we're not making it conditional that they be nice to us. We're not making it to be conditional in anything. But the only unconditional lover out there is the real. I am not an unconditional lover because, for one thing, I'd have a hard time if I was dropped in the middle of China and tried to unconditionally love anybody, because I don't think anybody would understand what I was talking about, because I don't speak Chinese, and that would be a difficulty. I'd probably get by. I'd probably survive somehow, but it would be difficult because nobody would understand me
But
or my.
Paul, I can love my dog and we can't speak to each other.
Well, I think you know as well as I do that dogs have an incredible emotional attunement to people and people to dogs, and particularly dog lovers know this very well. So no. There's various human beings don't usually relate so simply on a sort of emotional herd thing, but
Yeah.
I don't need to have it for everything either. So I'll tend to have it if you give me a chance. Okay. Yes.
Beautiful share conversation. Um, so I wanted to, kind of give Pia one of the last words, one of the last things she said today. Oh, if you can go to page 201 for me, that'd be great, bro. Where it says unexpected fears and uncertainties, and I'll just sort of read that as her last thing for tonight. Um, and you guys can feel free to comment on that. And I guess in the last 4 minutes that we have, or not. Did you get there already, bro? I can't see it on my screen. Oh,
No, just give me a minute.
okay. Mm-mm-mm.
You see, we're still stuck in time. How did that happen?
It's 231 in the PDF.
Oh, I'm sorry. 201 in the PDF.
No, 201 on the actual book page, but it's like the
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
231.
231 in the PDF?
Well,
Hmm.
typed in 231 into the reader, it'll take you to page 201. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, bro. Thank
Got
you.
it. Thank you, David.
Yes. So I'll start reading unexpected fear. Oh, you're up, bro. Is it up? Yeah. Okay. Let me go back because I just have a little bit bigger on my side. Okay. Unexpected fears and uncertainties. Besides the pain and joy, there were some fears and uncertainties I hadn't counted on. For instance, when I started into recovery, I was quite a perfectionist. I was overmature and controlling. I felt old and worn out. It was as if I were 36 going on 80. When I let go of being controlling, I became like a very immature, chaotic child, whining like a baby all the time and engaging in amazing, immature behavior I never thought I was capable of. It was behavior I'd never done before because I never was a child. Yet I was deluded about my behavior and couldn't see that it was childish and self centered. The idea that I could choose not to be the way I always had been was a heady trip. But every now and then, I'd break through that delusion because my husband or my surrogate mom would confront it. My surrogate mom would say something like, "You know, it's hard to be in a relationship with you because you're so self centered. You never call me. I always have to call you. It was really painful because I love this woman." Perhaps the most painful and uncertain experience for me was when I moved from when I moved from needlessness to experiencing my needs. I became aware for the first time of what my needs were, and also that I knew how to take care of very few of them, almost none. I found it very painful even to admit I had the needs, much less to set out to get them met. And when I began to be more vulnerable, I felt as if I were unprotected and that everything that came at me would destroy me. But fortunately, it gets better, a lot better. After over 6 years of being in recovery process, I lived much of my life in the recovery set of characteristics listed earlier in this chapter. And the pain and shame about the past and the fear that I'll never be all right have been replaced by serenity based on the hope I'm experiencing. I'm discovering this hope through my higher power. The tools of recovery included in the 12 steps and my recovering friends. But of course, I don't stay there all the time. I thought that was a really beautiful point to end on, you know, just this whole epiphany she had of really seeing that she has needs and that she has the tools to meet those needs, even though she didn't know how she'd do it. And that one of the things that's helping her is having community, some trusted mirrors, some safe mirrors to speak truth to her and for her to realize, hey, I'm just on this recovery journey. I slip. I'm not there all the time, but I have a, a supportive ecosystem I've built around me to help reflect the possibility of a more healthy relationship with self and others.
Yeah, and don't worry if those self and others don't if those others don't show up for you, that you find that the people that you thought you could trust aren't trustworthy or are not as trustworthy as you may need. Don't worry. Just know that the one thing that will never desert you
Mm,
through all your lives is the real.
mm,
Trust that. That's where your real hope needs to be grounded. Yeah, I mean, I've lived through many communities, and I'm still primarily a solitary goat. Um, but I get around. As you uh,
Thank you all for joining us this evening.
I love it.
Now 9:30. It's been
Thank you
wonderful
very
being
much.
in community with y'all and talking and connecting and learning and sharing. Osama?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Like you said, Antoine. Um, yeah, keeping the work, and I like the ending of that last paragraph that you read of like it's not always there, so it's always a working progress, right? A masterpiece that's being and becoming, and it's constantly in that liminal space, as Paul said in the barzakh, that liminal space that we continue to be. Um, yeah, this was beautiful. Thank you so much for this pick. Thank you all for joining. Next month, June, we will be reading the Tao Te Ching, um, God willing. So we'll dive into that. And um,
which we are we all going to pick our own translation?
no, I have a translation. You get it. I think it's the translation. Well, good catch. The translation by Stephen Mitchell, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
If you have a better one, send it over, Paul. It doesn't seem that
No,
excited.
no, 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 no. There are no better ones. I think we need to learn Chinese.
Okay. That's what I keep saying. If I know Chinese, I'll probably be a Taoist. Um,
Uh,
Stop right there.
yeah,
You'd still be a Taoist and not speak Chinese, you know.
yeah, indeed, indeed. Yep, that would be a Sufi in my book. No, I'm joking.
God
it's
bless
funny
each
is
one of you guys.
Yeah,
yeah, I remember a bunch of
bless you all.
no, a bunch of Chinese people that came over here and wanted to learn how to read the Tarot because they didn't think Taoism was that interesting. They
Interesting.
really know how to do the Tarot.
Well, thank you all so much. RM, thank you for joining. David, Paul, Lori, everybody. And for people who are watching the replay, also thank you. We will see you next month, God willing.
Yes. Peace.